For too long, women have not been heard or believed.
You told the world that time's up on violence.
1 out of every 5 women will be sexually assaulted and raped before she reaches the age of 18.
It's 2018 and I've realized that nobody is safe long as she is alive. And every friend that I know has a story like mine.
You think that just because I'm a woman, I'm incapable of making my own choices?
It doesn't matter what you think.
Don't I as a woman deserve to even have an opinion? Don't you?
You have no idea what it is to be a woman.
So I asked myself, what can I say about being a woman?
Hi, my name is DAmini and this is Her. Women have a big impact on our lives, especially as we're growing up. They're our mothers, our grandmothers, our sisters, our aunts, our cousins, our partners, and so on. Women have the power to create nations. They help shape the world, our societies, and communities. Women are amazing. They are innovators, trailblazers, creators, and dreamers. In this series, Her, I will interview a dozen inspiring and influential women from different backgrounds. Are you ready to meet her? Let's go! Okay, so who is Mayann Francis?
Mayann Francis. I am originally from Cape Breton, Whitney Pier, Nova Scotia. I was the first Lieutenant Governor for the province of Nova Scotia, and that took place from 2006 to 2012. So that's who I am.
What are some defining moments in a girl's life? What was yours?
Well, there were so many defining times in different people's lives. And I always say that the defining time in my life, there are many, but I always think about growing up in Whitney Pier. Because growing up in Whitney Pier was an area that was clearly, I'll use the word that was not used way back then, that only came into time within the last 30 years or so, but it was a multicultural community. There were people from all over the world, from the Caribbean, from England, from the Ukraine, from Poland, from France, just all over. So it was a community where we became familiar with people who did not look like you. And so I looked at that as a defining moment because it gave you the sense for, once you left, you felt good, you understood things. I was surprised when I left because I said, oh, that wasn't normal everywhere. It certainly was not a normal feeling everywhere. In any event, Whitney Pier, I always say too, that it formed a foundation also in the foundation for my faith and love of God. My father was a clergy, and there were plenty of churches and a synagogue in the Pier. So if the faith in God has always helped me all along the way, forever. And it has been just something that I still talk about today. I give thanks to God for the success that I've had in my life, and that's what's very important to me. Some of the other defining moments that I found very interesting is looking at the people in the Caribbean community. Many of them were entrepreneurs, which was very, very good for way back when, since I'm a senior. Mm-hmm. And there was in the Pier was also first Black teacher, also first Black nurse. There were people who became secretaries, and many of the women were housewives, so a lot of them didn't work, but they always demonstrated caring for other people. For example, if they were cooking certain foods, they shared it with people. My mother was somebody who sewed quite a bit of our clothing. And she had an organization, I should say, for us young people at school. We would always attend every Monday. I talk about it a lot in my memoir. And what happens too is that once my sister and I, we outgrew our clothing that she made, she sent it on down in the community. So I looked at all of those as defining moments because it gives you a sense of how you look at the world. And also, when I was in grade 7, I failed. And that was a shock to me. And I talk about that in my memoir as well. It was shocking because I was somebody who studied hard, I worked hard, and I just was not expecting that. But why I say it's a defining moment in a sense, because it made me commit and pray and say, I will be successful. And that's what I lived by. And that's what that negative aspect did to me. And I became very courageous, very strong, always studying and being educated along the line. And when I left the junior high, I was in the top 5. So worked out well.
Way to get back up.
Yeah, absolutely.
How have women around you influenced your life? You talked about your mom sewing dresses for you and your sister. So how has she influenced your life?
My mom has influenced my life in the sense of her commitment to education, to caring for people. I'm not saying that she didn't have her own challenges, because in my memoir I talk about challenges that she had with her own mother. But she influenced my life in a sense that some people wouldn't find it an influence, but she was very strict. Both of them were strict. Her and my dad were strict. So I lived through it. But anyway, she emphasized education all the time, every single day, because she did not have a high school. However, she always seemed to, not online, but there were places that she would write to, and they would send her tests, and she would do the test, and then she'd say, I passed. I have no idea what they were, but she would show us them. So that always gave you the sense of the importance of education. Plus, she played a very active role in the church, chair of the women's committee. She was a Sunday school teacher. So all of that was great for somebody who did not have a full education, but that was her priority. And then, of course, my dad, being the clergy, with his, he was also somebody who was a strong supporter of justice and equity. Again, equity was not a word you heard about a long time ago, but he made sure that the Black people in the community, that the girls who graduated from high school got a job, and he made sure that happened, and it did work out. So, those are things that I think about often, even though it's been a long time ago, it still has had a positive impact on my life.
How do you think the world's view of women has evolved, negatively or positively?
Well, I think many years ago it was kind of negative, unfortunately. But nowadays, when you look at the success of many women, that gives people a strong sense that women are capable. You've had women who were heads of government, you have people who were they were ministers in government. You have people in the United States who ran in political parties. It was just, there's a lot of examples out there. And when you look at Black women as well have been very successful in many areas. And it took them a long time also to be able to be recognized that we are capable and we can go forward. Our challenge with being women is not just being a woman, it's being Black or being an Indigenous woman or being a woman of color. So we have both of those to deal with. And those are the things that we have to be fighting the stereotype for, people's thoughts about racism and people who act racist or sexist, and that's a challenge for us. But There are many of us who have been successful across the world and in Canada, in Nova Scotia, and gives examples of being successful and hoping that will encourage not only Black women, but the people who own has jobs and have boards and so forth, that they're looking to hire us, which I think is extremely important to recognize.
What do you believe can be done to address many gender stereotypes that are like put out there and women have to deal with?
There's a challenge for us all the time because there are people who have ideas and thoughts which are negative, and they are as a result of, I like to say, trace it all the way back to slavery, that gives systemic discrimination, and this systemic discrimination gives false understanding of people who are Black, and it also I guess I would say that it also created the notion of white privilege, unconscious bias, microaggression, and all of this negativity was there, and it still is today. So it's a big challenge for us, but I still think that we can fight those challenges. And that's why it's important when we have Black History Month, you learn about the past, the present, and for us going forward, the future. And it's the same thing for women's celebration. And the women's celebration must also include women of color, women who are Black, women who are Indigenous. So a lot of ways of looking at all of this is we have to have education about it. There has to be education. Companies have to start looking at their policies. There's so much, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's not impossible.
Why do you think it's important to celebrate International Women's Day?
Well, I recently just said about studying the past, present, and the future. So it's absolutely important that we have that, because that opens up many doors and people's minds, and there's always something new to learn. And I think that it is absolutely important that we have International Women's Day, because especially now it's always been important, but now that you have such a diversity of women, it's even more important to have that, because we have to recognize that, identify it, and also be happy about it. So you have to learn diversity, inclusivity, breaking down the stereotypes, and just encouraging people who are women, people who are women who are of color, people who are women who are Indigenous, encouraging us to move forward. And whether you're a woman who is disabled, same thing, got to encourage, and we can be helped. There's no question about that. So it's so important to have that celebration of Women's Day. We should be celebrating it all the time, but I mean, when you have it a special day for that, that opens up, as I said, people's minds and opens many doors.
Definitely. What does the 2022 IWD theme, #BreakTheBias, mean to you?
I think it means look at the reality of what racism is all about. Look at the reality of diversity. Look at the reality of equity. That's what I think it means. And when you start looking at that and understanding that, that gives you a sense of, you know what, we're walking forward. We're going to be inclusive because we understand what it is. And this is something that has to be done every day. And it's an educational opportunity. And also it's to look at, when I say education, I'm thinking if you're having things in schools, presentations in elementaries, presentations in junior high, presentations in high school, universities, these are very important. So I think that that theme is great, very good.
How can we include more racialized women in leadership roles?
Now that's a good question, and I look at it. I'll take it as a personal thing. That's what I've gone through, and I always say that during my writing of my memoir, I talked about what I felt was very important to move forward, and for me again, my faith in God, that kept me going forward. The other piece was courage. The other piece was education. I'm just saying them all, I'm not giving any particular order. Education, courage, determination, setting examples. And so I knew I was always the first appointed to something, I would make sure that I was close to perfect, if not perfect. And why I say that, because I wanted to make sure that there was also a number 2, a number 3, a number 4 appointed, because if I wasn't successful or doing a great job, that would give people an excuse for not hiring somebody else, right? Because they would just say, oh, well, we did hire somebody who was Black and she didn't do a really good job. You know what I'm saying? So that would be a stereotype and making assumptions. So I always put that in my heart to do that. I also felt too that if I wanted to be on a board or working someplace, I made sure I understood the place. I clearly knew about it so that if I was successful, I was not in a place that I felt uncomfortable. I mean, maybe feeling uncomfortable because of the color of my skin, but the fact is that I know the place, determination, be strategic, etc. And I was always very fortunate to have mentorship. So even when I started as a first in many positions, there were many people who reached out and was my mentor. It was really very, very exciting for me to have that. And when I lived in the United States, and I tell people that I had most of my mentors were there because I was in the United States for 16 years. And I was the first on Wall Street and some other places. And I have a feeling too that the fact that I was Canadian, they said, oh, well, we really have to be nice to her. So, so I had some very, very good mentors, and it was wonderful. And that gave me many ideas about being strategic, about how you do things, and they encouraged me. So it was all about that. And education was another top priority for me throughout my career. And I'm not just saying education that has to be in a university or a college. It could be reading, meeting with people who you know have been successful, or people who has the strategy about climbing up the ladder. So this was always a learning experience for me in life, and that I always commend and say that's what helped me be successful.
What do you think allies can do to help achieve gender equity?
That's a very good question. And I think allies have to be very honest. They have to know their own personalities as well. And they have to understand if they find out that they're not perfect in certain ideas, that's okay, because you're not God. But the point is, you can learn. And allies must recognize that they could be reaching out to communities. They can be reaching out to organizations that are experts in the area of Black women, or just Black individuals themselves. And that's very important. And I think that people who own businesses or who are heads of businesses and they want to be an ally, they have to look at their policies. They have to have a good look at their policies to make sure that their policies do not have systemic discrimination pieces within it. They also have to make sure that their environment itself is a friendly environment for people who are women and people who are of color. They have to be very honest about their place, And when they're looking to want to make their place inclusive, they have to make sure the place has a welcoming environment, and that people do understand the people who are of color, people who are Black, people who are women. They have to understand that. And so that means that there should be regular educational information about gender, about race, about disorientation, whatever it is. You have to have that all the time. That sensitivity must be there. So I think that allies have to understand that. And if they want to make sure that they have inclusive and many people from different races and gender, as I said earlier, get to the communities, talk to people in the communities, go make presentations in communities. And as I said, the environment must be a welcoming environment.
Almost certain too that, like, in order for people to be able to grow and learn and have opportunity, it has to be like a welcome environment. What advice do you have for the next generation of amazing women? What do you have to say to her?
Well, it's very personal, and I would always say that my faith in God is number one. Okay, that's me. And I would also say to people that it is so important that you have confidence in who you are, that you have the courage that you are somebody, and not feel if somebody is have a negative experience like I did in grade 7, but that made me get stronger. So have that in you. Also stay humble. Also swallow your pride many times. Do things to help community, to help people, not to give you a name or an award. Be, as I say, I like people who are humble, and I've had 2 women in my life who I found who are extremely humble like that. And they're both of them are deceased, but they were just amazing mentors that I say, and friends. And, things that they would do, and I'll say, you did this, right? And they'll say, oh, why are you asking? Who did that? This type of thing, because they were just so proud and so humble and caring. And they had so many people who respected them. And I always say again, education, reading, all of that is so important. And, and for me, that my journey of success is something that I will always be happy about, and my happiness goes to God. And at this stage of my life, what I like to do is talking with young people, the next generation, and I like to learn from them too. So I enjoy talking to the next generation, because I just think it's absolutely fantastic. Because times now are, I would say, somebody would say they're not more challenging than they were 10 years ago. Well, I think they are. And so talking to young people and really talking to them about what I have done, let them ask me the questions, how that will work for me or not. I love to have those conversations with them. I think it's extremely important. So the challenge going forward, stay positive, stay strong, have confidence in yourself, be proud of who you are. Be proud of who you are. And just move forward, because you know what? We're all on this earth for a reason. And that's how I always feel, that God has given me a purpose. And sometimes I say, but God, I'm getting tired. But anyhow, you keep moving. And I think that that's important. And demonstrate love and caring. And I always say to people, remember, united we stand, Divided we fall.